really bad. I mean, people die. There, you see I have a Google alert for hoarding and stuff, and every week when I get my Google alert, there's somewhere in America, there is somebody that got basically smothered by all of their stuff, or there was a fire and they couldn't get out because of all of the stuff, because it is so cluttered. And the worst case I've seen, it was an older lady who had been in a hoarding situation for several decades. She lived alone, and she actually had around her master bathroom toilet a layer of fecal matter 1 foot high because the toilet didn't work anymore. So she just relieved herself, and then there are bottles or bags of urine as well. So people with hoarding disorder, they tend to solve problems. They're very creative and usually very intelligent folk. They tend to solve the problems that are created by hoarding by not addressing the hoarding. They work around the problem.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Thomas Hughes. I am a child and adolescent psychiatrist. I am here today with Dr. Danielle Schlichter, who is going to talk to us about hoarding disorder. All right. So I'm not even going to make any delays. I'm just going to turn it over to you. Tell us a few things about yourself. What should we know about you?
Well, as you said, I'm Dr. Dani Schlichter, and I'm a clinical psychologist. I specialize in hoarding disorder. I have a private practice in Glendale, California. And I work mainly in, as far as hoarding disorder, I do a lot more training of other mental health professionals or human service professionals about hoarding disorder, because not a lot of people know about it because it's a fairly new diagnosis in the DSM. And then my private practice consists of what I call my unicorn hoarders.
Unicorn hoarders?
Yes, because I can divide people that hoard into two groups. You have the people that are the unicorns who recognize they have an issue with hoarding or extreme clutter and want help. And then there's the other 95% that don't see that there's really a problem, don't want help, and might get a little defensive or even a little belligerent about it. And so those are the people that I train, those are the providers that I train to help work with those folks that don't want help but are living in probably some unsafe or unhealthy environments. Yeah. And then in my regular private practice, I work with unicorns, but mainly it's just that kind of general, the normal stuff you would see: depression, anxiety, PTSD, trauma work, stuff like that.
Okay, so 95% are.
That's just me throwing out a number.
Okay, but generally speaking, most people they do not or they do know that they or accept that they have hoarding disorder.
Most people don't.
Most people don't.
Yeah.
Okay,
There's
okay.
even a qualifier on the DSM criteria for diagnosing about level of insight.
Got it.
Because oftentimes people have little to no insight into how severe the hoarding has become.
And as both of us know, insight is one of the biggest things. It's very important.
Yeah.
In mental health, it's one of the most difficult things to achieve with a lot of people. So yeah, okay.
Yeah. Once you have insight into your disorder, into your challenges, that helps to unlock all of the changes that you can make, right?
Yeah. It's one of the first steps to getting well, I think, in my opinion.
I think so.
One of the
too.
first steps. Okay, so one thing that I noticed when I was looking, you saw me looking at your page there online. You have a PsyD. What is the difference between a PsyD and a PhD? Just so
Right.
people know what sort of degree levels there are out there that might be able to assist them with issues like this.
That's a good question. So PsyD started in, I think, the 70s as kind of an alternative to the traditional PhD. They started to form these professional schools. It's still a doctorate in psychology, but it's less research-based, and they started to create professional schools for psychologists who were getting PsyDs instead of going through more of the traditional university system where, it was you're trained to be more of a researcher. This is more you're trained to be a clinician.
Oh, okay. So that would be the difference.
Yeah.
Instead of you having to do more research, you're doing more of the clinical work.
Right. I'm trained to work with my clients. I'm trained to use the research to work better with my clients.
Okay. So with that being said, I think it's a good idea for us to transition back to what you were talking about with the unicorns, the 95%. Okay. I would like to know, how does someone who they might not even know that they notice that they have an issue. How would someone know that they have either hoarding disorder or things have transitioned into something that would be concerning for a clinician such as yourself?
Yeah, so that's a really good question because I think a lot of people, when I start talking about what hoarding disorder looks like and symptoms and all of that, they get that first year medical student syndrome where they're like, "Oh my God, I have it."
That's a real thing. Yes.
Yeah. But as you know, when you're talking about pretty much any diagnosis that's in the DSM, we all have elements of it. I mean, for instance, like I am not diagnostically OCD, but don't load the dishwasher the wrong way. I will spend an extra 5 minutes reloading it correctly
Right.
before I run it through
Right.
because it's driving me bananas. But it doesn't interfere with my life, right? It's that point where it's become dysfunctional. You cannot, function in your daily life because of whatever the challenge is. And in this case, hoarding disorder. So your life has become unmanageable in terms of the clutter. You can't sleep in your bed because there's too much clutter. You can't function in your kitchen and cook a meal because there's too much stuff. It's become unmanageable. And then they do have a qualifier in the diagnostic stuff about how if there is not a lot of clutter and you can function in those spaces, it's only because of the intervention of somebody else. Somebody else has cleaned up for you. Someone else, has put boundaries or limits so that you cannot clutter. So basically, if you are not able to function in your space because of the clutter, that's probably a sign that it looks like hoarding disorder.
And it matters if it's independent of other people helping you set boundaries.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
How long does someone need to have, and this is for DSM, because DSM is different from real life a lot of times.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't have textbook, this is how long this person has suffered from this. We just don't have that kind of information. Sometimes people just don't remember when it started. But I think it's important for us to get the textbook stuff down first.
Mm-hmm.
How long does the DSM say that we need or a person needs to have suffered from this condition?
That's a good question. I don't recall that there is kind of one of those time limits like you would, in order to have PTSD, it has to be this. I don't recall that. I don't think there is. I do know that onset, we can talk about onset.
Sure. Yeah.
So most people have onset in early adolescence. That's when you start to see it. However, there's a bunch of people that it is genetic. It runs in families. There are some people that are genetically predisposed to it, have never hoarded in their life, and then some kind of major trauma happens, a car accident, the loss, unexpected loss of a child or a spouse, maybe some kind of assault, something like that, and it just turns it on. So they've been never hoarding in their whole life. Really? They're 60-something years old, and boom, they're hoarding. Yeah.
All right. So you're saying sometimes it can be an environmental thing that happens to them.
Well, it's something about, so hoarding disorder is brain-based.
Okay.
The brain of a person with HD or hoarding disorder simply looks different than the brain of somebody that doesn't have it. Okay. And so sometimes something happens where they haven't hoarded before. That trauma, that assault, that accident, whatever it is, that loss, it like switches something on.
I got you. They're predisposed to, their brain chemistry is predisposed to it, and something environmental happens, it just sort of unlocks one of those issues.
Yeah, so that's because of the two ways that you start to see hoarding disorder develop. Early adolescence, and usually things aren't as bad in early adolescence. It really only develops, it sometimes takes years because it's an accumulation of stuff over time, right?
Yeah.
And also people who are young, they often don't have a lot of money, right? Or they have their parents controlling them, and so they're controlling the spaces so the behavior is a little more controlled, or they don't have the opportunity to go shopping at Target or wherever they're getting their stuff and bringing it in because they just don't have the financial resources. But as someone gets older and they develop more independence and more autonomy, it can start to accumulate a lot more.
So you saying that matters to me a lot because the parent's interaction with the child matters a lot when it comes to anything, depression, anxiety, but OCD and hoarding disorder. Those are two that I can think of where a partnership with the parent might matter quite a bit. Yeah. Do you work with the younger population, or do you mostly work with adults?
I mainly work with adults.
Okay.
I mainly work with adults. Mainly, in my previous lifetime, I was a teacher. I taught middle school for a few years, and
Middle school?
oh yeah,
Wow.
I know, I'm very brave.
You are.
What I enjoyed about middle school was I loved the kids, but then it's when you get into all the adult stuff and you have to work with the parents on it and all of that other stuff that comes in, that was not fun. So, and I think the same thing happens when you're dealing with the children in psychology. There's so much more besides just working with the kid out there that I don't want to get into.
No, I can get into it. It's one of those things that's just sort of it's another layer of difficulty for treatment. But unfortunately, like you mentioned, it usually starts in adolescence.
Yeah.
By the time you catch them, though, they've probably had 10 years of.
Oh yeah, or
okay.
more.
Or more.
Yeah, most of the people that end up my way are usually 50s, 60s, 70s. I mean, it's really a lot older.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was thinking 30s, 40s, 50s.
I mean, well, again, it depends. You get some unicorns, right?
Of course. Okay. Yeah.
You get some of those unicorns, and sometimes they aren't unicorns by just self-reflection so much as their spouse is like, that's it. I'm putting down. You need to get this under control.
Okay, so it's not the patient that. Okay, I understand. It's other people who have come to them and said, enough is enough.
Usually that's how it goes.
I can't take this anymore. Your stuff is all over the place. I'm worried about you. Got it. Okay. Can you paint a picture? And we're talking about the most severe case that you may have seen. Can you paint a picture of what that looks like for people so that they can understand? Because I think in most people's heads, when they hear about hoarding disorder, they might just think to themselves, oh, this person is just messy.
Right.
I'm messy. Why is this person different from me?
Right.
Right. So what, in terms of severity, how bad can things get for someone that is suffering from hoarding disorder?
Things can get really bad. I mean, people die. I have a Google alert for hoarding and stuff, and every week when I get my Google alert, there's somewhere in America, there is somebody that got basically smothered by all of their stuff, or there was a fire and they couldn't get out because of all of the stuff, because it is so cluttered. There's actually an assessment called the clutter image rating, and it's a series of photos of an apartment. There's a living room, a kitchen, and a bedroom, and it goes from 1, which is virtually no clutter, and then the people that created it, they just kept cluttering it up, all the way to 9, which is clutter that goes from floor to ceiling.
What?
Yeah.
I'm thinking of just maybe kneecap, your knees.
Yeah, and it doesn't always get that severe, but I
asked you about the most severe case.
Yeah, it does. And what you will see is that people can't really open the doors to get into, they kind of squeeze into their spaces or whatever, and there's just stuff piled high everywhere. And they have what are called goat paths, which are just like little
Why do they call them goat paths?
I'm not exactly sure. I'm guessing it has something to do with goats in the wild and the little way. So they just kind of make their way through to the spaces that get them to wherever they need to go into the apartment or their home or wherever they're living. They probably cannot use their kitchen to cook a meal. There's probably only one space where, probably one chair that in the living room or something where they've kind of carved out, and that's where they sit, that's where they sleep, that's where they eat. They might not even have use of their showers and their toilets and their sinks. So maybe they go, they belong to a gym or something, and that's where they'll go and they'll shower and stuff. And the worst case I've seen, it was an older lady who had been in a hoarding situation for several decades. She lived alone, and she actually had around her master bathroom toilet a layer of fecal matter 1 foot high because the toilet didn't work anymore. So she just relieved herself, and then there are bottles or bags of urine as well. So people with hoarding disorder, they tend to solve problems. They're very creative and usually very intelligent folk. They tend to solve the problems that are created by hoarding by not addressing the hoarding. They work around the problem. So when I'm doing lectures about this topic, I have a slide that shows a very hoarded living room, and kind of in the middle of it is this microwave oven in the middle of the living room on top of all this other clutter. And so what I say has happened is that person needs to prepare meals, but their actual kitchen is so cluttered, so hoarded out that they cannot prepare anything in there. So instead of working on that, they purchase another microwave, put it in, someplace that has space, and they use that. They also might get like a little dorm fridge or something, or an ice chest.
They purchase. Wow.
Yeah.
Wait. So okay. Let's imagine. I mean, you can't answer for every person with hoarding disorder, but this is in a house, right? Does this typical or apartment, does their stuff have to be in that house, or do they ever store stuff in the backyard?
They'll put it everywhere.
Okay.
You'll see whenever I go to the grocery store or anywhere in the parking lot, it'll be in people's cars. I'll know.
Okay.
I'll oh yeah, that's someone with hoarding disorder. Or
Okay.
I walk by people's houses, and I can usually tell because the yard has some clutter in it. Sometimes they put their shades down or their curtains down, but you'll see the curtain is up against the window because of all the stuff up against the window. So people with hoarding disorder, even though they don't have a lot of insight often into how severe it is or what a problem it is, they do know by people's reactions that have come in and witnessed it, that they know that they somehow should feel ashamed of it or embarrassed, or at least try to hide it. So they're always trying to hide it. And if someone has more financial resources, they might have several homes or several storage units, or I saw one person I worked with who had a warehouse, it was an old warehouse on kind of the bad side of town or whatever, so it was pretty cheap. He rented this space that had to be 40,000 square feet, and it was just floor to ceiling of stuff that he was storing.
Wow. But it's always in a place that they own.
Usually, or sometimes they will, friends or relatives can be enablers, and they'll be like, hey, could you store this for me? Until people start to put the boundaries on it.
And again, it becomes too much, and then they come see you.
or their friends or loved ones or landlords or the fire chief or animal control, they'll be calling me. And I do a lot of consulting.
Right.
With people that have to deal with people that hoard in their life.
Okay. I have two questions after, and that was a good picture that you painted. You did it. Thank you.
Sure.
You are very experienced with talking about hoarding disorder. Okay. So my question is, are there psychological theories as to how this develops with people?
That's a good question.
Theories.
I mean, I think it's just something that's kind of inborn. You had mentioned earlier about, when working with the importance of the parent relationship with OCD and HD, which I thought was really interesting that you picked up on that, because OCD and HD, very, very similar.
Yes, yeah. It sounds when you describe it, it's very similar. And when you described how sometimes the onset, I clicked on with the eating disorder thing. I mean, there's similarities with all of these conditions.
I feel like there's also similarities sometimes with drug and alcohol misuse or abuse or addiction, things like that.
Something sparked something within someone to start taking the drug or whatever it is, and then so you're off to the races.
Because I think with OCD, and I think similarly with HD, at its core, at its base, it's anxiety. It's an anxiety-based disorder, and with HD, if I had to sum it up, it's about avoidance. And what are they avoiding? Very similar to OCD. They're avoiding feelings, uncomfortable feelings. And the more you start to avoid the uncomfortable feelings, the scarier it becomes to think about even having those feelings. So it's like this negative feedback loop. So you just start to avoid having all these feelings, because when someone, so the main difference between HD and OCD is, I'm probably not answering your question. I've gotten far afield.
I don't even remember what the question was. Just keep talking.
It was
It's
a
okay.
theory of it. It was
Oh, yeah, that's right.
theory.
That's right.
But the main thing with OCD is that it's what all the academicians call, ego dystonic, right? It doesn't feel good. So if someone has OCD, like let's say they're kind of that germaphobe, hand washing kind of person, they know that it is not logical. They feel compelled to do it, and it doesn't feel good. It's ego dystonic. It doesn't feel good to do. Hoarding disorder, on the other hand, it feels really good, because when you have your stuff, because there's different parts of hoarding. There's the saving, and there's the reveling in your stuff. There, you enjoy just being with your things or animals, because you can hoard animals too.
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, you've never seen any instances of animal hoarding? It's tragic. It's awful.
Well, I just always thought of it as, the stereotypical, I don't know if it's stereotypical, but the description of like an older lady who's
with
alone
100 cats.
I don't know about 100 cats. Maybe I would have thought of hoarding if it was 100 cats, but I'm thinking like 20 cats.
Mm-hmm. That's still a hoarding situation.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Well, but if you think about it, stuff and animals, they don't abuse you. They don't talk back to you. They don't criticize you. They're always there. I mean, and with animals, it's like unconditional love, right? So, I mean, because a lot of people with HD, they don't have, there's some personality disorders that are sometimes common, like OCPD or narcissistic personality disorder, things like that, borderline personality disorder. Their ability to connect and relate to people sometimes isn't as strong, probably because they've been avoiding for so long that they never developed those skills. They're too afraid of the uncomfortable feelings. They're too afraid of being hurt.
Okay. So with all that in mind, we now have a picture of what an HD patient might look like. We talked a little bit about how it might develop. I mean, you mentioned anxiety as maybe something that you might find with somebody with hoarding disorder. What do you do when someone comes to you and they say, hey, someone else says.
It could be you.
It could be, right? Someone comes to you, whoever it is, and they say, I have an issue with hoarding disorder. How do you help them? What do you do?
Well, for those unicorns that say, hey, I want some help, it's a lot easier. I work quite similarly to people with OCD, because like kind of that gold standard of treatment with OCD is exposure with response prevention. You could do the same thing, and it's doing the same function. It's having them experience feelings that they've been avoiding feeling because it seems too scary or overwhelming. So I'm trying to think. So the way it would work with an exposure therapy with someone, and say, okay, so Mary, I'll say Thomas. Thomas,
sure. Yes.
Here we have your pen.
Okay. I hoard electronics, by the way, so
so
that's fine.
Let's say you're super connected to your pen.
Okay.
All right. So Thomas, I'm going to take your pen. And of course, you have, you've given me consent to do this technique, right? Okay. We're going to take this pen and we're going to discard it because you have 322 other pens. You don't need this. We're going to throw it out. And I'm going to say, all right, so Thomas, on a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 being nothing or neutral and 10 being the highest amount of distress you can imagine, where are you at with that thought of throwing out the pen? And someone with HD, probably going to be 9, 10, 15, 20. Yeah, too much. Right. Like, great. I'm going to set a timer on my phone for like 5 or 10 minutes. We're going to either do some mindfulness work or maybe even distraction and just talk about, hey, tell me about that movie you saw the other day. Timer goes off. And I say, Thomas, you were at a 15 out of 10. Where are you now? Well, I was at a 15. Maybe I'm at a 12. Great. I'm going to set another timer. And we're going to keep doing that. And what it's teaching them is that they can handle these feelings. It's doesn't feel good. It's uncomfortable, but it always goes down if you start to process them. If you consciously sit in your feelings, it starts to go down. And this happens with every feeling, even the good ones. So, oh my God, I won the lottery. Woo! So I'm a 10 out of 10 on, I'm ecstatic. I'm so excited. Well, talk to me in like a half hour. Am I still like logically excited I won the lottery? Well, sure. Yeah, super excited about it. But because I've processed that feeling, it's gone down to maybe a 5. Talk to me in 3 weeks. It's probably at a 0 or a 1. Again, still happy I won the lottery logically, but the feeling has processed. Feelings come, feelings go, and most people aren't aware of that's how things work. So we want to get them more comfortable in the discomfort of those feelings and more cognizant of it. Yeah, and actually, I'd love to share with you something about. Well, I can share this too in terms of like working with someone, because I don't just work in terms of exposure with response prevention. We also do a lot of psychoeducation about what hoarding disorder looks like, because people that have hoarding disorder, unicorns or not, most of them feel a lot of shame about it and try to hide it or dissociate from it entirely because it feels very painful. So one of the things I typically do is I share 2 kind of metaphors. One is so someone who has dyslexia, let's say, a kid with dyslexia, they're not diagnosed yet. They're being very challenged academically. They might be getting poor grades, probably getting a lot of pressure from their parents about, you just need to work harder. Maybe their peers are making fun of them, calling them stupid. Teachers are probably on their case. So they're getting a lot of messages about, I'm lazy, I'm stupid, I'm this, I'm that. And then miracle of miracles, somebody identifies they have this reading disorder. And what do? They say, hey, you know what? Your brain simply works differently, is wired differently than someone who doesn't have dyslexia. Let's get you to an educational specialist, to a reading specialist who can give you tools to work around that brain wiring so that you can achieve the same things as your peers.
Right.
And that kind of releases the shame. It's not that I can't do it or that there's something wrong with me morally or something. You're still a good person. You're a hard worker, but you need different tools. So like if I told you, Thomas, you have to go dig a giant hole, and I gave you a screwdriver. It doesn't matter how smart you are,
right.
how hard you work, how strong you are, you're not going to get very far. It's the wrong tool.
Right.
But if I give you a shovel, and if we start working on it and working your biceps and all of that, you're going to be a hole digging machine. So it's the same thing when I'm working with my clients. I talk to them about that. It's like you need different tools. You've been working with a screwdriver, because most people with hoarding disorder, even the non-unicorns, even the more resistant or reluctant ones, they don't want to live like that. They just can't figure out how to keep all of their stuff because they have such attachment to their stuff, and letting it go is panicking for them, but at the same time live the way they want to live.
They don't want their stuff to be in the way, but they want their stuff.
They want their stuff, but they can't figure out how to do it. So they're trying again and again and again, using their screwdriver to figure out how to reorganize, or how to, or well, maybe I'll just get another storage unit, or maybe I'll just do that. Again, solving around the problem.
Right.
So they need different tools. And so that's some of the stuff I can give them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And another way that I work with my both unicorn and non-unicorn clients is having them create a vision plan. So a vision plan for how do they want to live in their space? What do they want their space to look like? How do they want their spaces to function? Because we need to find some kind of motivation other than my partner is telling me I need to clean up in order to face this stuff.
You have to figure out what they want.
Yes.
Not what other people want.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So if you've ever had any experience with motivational interviewing, it's a lot of kind of those kind of techniques. It's like, what is their motivation to change? Do they have any room for change? So, let's say we have somebody who's not motivated to fix their hoarding issue, but their landlord is on their case and they're threatening eviction, so they have to make a change. So maybe it's like a grandmother, and her daughter is not letting the grandchildren come and visit her because it's unsafe.
That would motivate.
That might be her key. Yeah. Or let's say someone who's like a Food Network addict, right? They have recipe books and all these little food gadgets, to help them create the perfect meal, but there's no space to actually cook.
Okay.
Yeah, or the artist that has all of these art supplies, but there's no space to do their art. You find that and then and you kind of create the vision of like, how do you want to live? What do you want your home to be like? How do you want to function in your home? Do you want to have family dinners again around the dinner table? Connect with your family, connect with your friends, have book club, all of that stuff. And so that way, when they're in the nitty gritty of picking up the pen and saying, all right, do I keep this or let it go? The old question is, do I keep this or let it go? And the answer is always like, you think, well, do I want it or could I use it? With someone with HD, the answer is always yes, I do want it and I will use it. I don't know when, but just in case, I'm going to keep it around.
I want it here just in case.
Exactly. So many just in cases. But if we change the question to, will holding on to this pen move me towards my vision of how I want to live and how I want to function in my home? Or is this holding me back from my vision? The answer still might be, I guess I want to keep it, but it's a different question. You might get a different answer.
Depending upon the condition, the road to recovery can be more difficult.
Yeah.
So with hoarding disorder, I'm not all that familiar with it. What does the road to recovery look like for the average patient that has hoarding disorder?
So I'm going to do two examples. One is more unicorns, and one is I use more harm reduction techniques. So for my unicorns, as long as there's that motivation and they really want to change, you can do really well, because then you want to get towards maintenance, and you want to have systems of maintenance for all your stuff, and you want to become more mindful, feel your feelings, notice when you're having feelings, be present. One of the things I always go to is something I heard, I can't remember even where I heard it, where depression is kind of living in the past, anxiety is worry about the future, but right here, right now in the present, unless I'm currently being eaten by a bear, everything is okay. So the more we can train our brains to stay present focused and not fear the emotions that kind of ebb and flow quite naturally, you're going to be able to start to manage these things. But also, I'm training my unicorn clients through a lot of psychoeducation to understand that they're going to have some issues with decision-making skills. They're going to have some issues with the ability to visualize and see their clutter. There's something that's called clutter blindness that happens, where somebody with HD just doesn't see the clutter in front of them in the same way other people see it. So you have to start to train them to recognize and put in rules and systems of maintenance and to do that. And if they're willing to kind of stick with it, and a lot of this is cognitive behavioral therapy based, you can do really well. But when the motivations start to flag and when the fears start to come in and the avoidance starts to come in, again, you start to backslide. So I don't have any statistics about, rates and stuff like that. But the more you can keep someone motivated to continue to work on these new tools that they've been using and to continue to use the tools, the more successful you'll be. And then working with people who are a little more reluctant or resistant even, we use a harm reduction model to help those folks out. So harm reduction, you've probably heard it usually in reference to people that have substance use issues. It's like, well, I'm just going to continue using. So
needle exchange programs, things
right.
like that.
Yeah, methadone clinics, even people who engage in sex work and they want to continue doing sex work. How can we create a safer, healthier environment if you're going to continue to do something that is not safe and healthy, right? How can we optimize the safety of it? Same thing here. So a lot of times I use a lot of rules and I use a lot of boundaries, visual boundaries. So let's say there's somebody who is like a knitter, and they have thousands of skeins of yarn and knitting needles all over their places, right?
I just can't. It's hard for me to visualize. But go ahead, go on.
Okay,
Go on. Yeah.
So we're gonna create rules for them, because if you recall, I briefly talked about how people with HD, they have a lot of issues with decision making. They're worried about making the wrong decision, and there's something that goes on in their brains, the way it's wired, where even before they make a decision, and it could be about anything, it's not just stuff. Their brains are telling them you've made the wrong decision and you should be ashamed of yourself. So they're already like
even before
they make the decision, when they are presented with the decision, that those kinds of things are coming up for them. So if I create rules like, all right, so Thomas, you're a big knitter, and we're gonna containerize these skeins of yarn that you have. So here are 3 giant plastic bins full of that we're gonna put all of your knitting materials in, and we're going to go through and wean it down so that everything fits in these 3 containers, or whatever is an appropriate amount for the space that they have. And so when they go out to Joann Fabrics or Michael's or wherever they get their special yarn, oh my God, I found the best yarn. It's cashmere and it's pink and I love it. I'm so excited. Well, they already have their 3 full bins at home. So before they bring it in, they have to say, all right, if I really love this and I want to bring this in, I'm going to have to get rid of 1 skein of yarn to make room for it. So, but this helps with the decision making,
right,
because they don't have to decide, what, if I'm going to keep it or let it go or anything like that. It's more of, the rule is I can't have more than 3 bins full of things. So I just have to figure out how to make that work. Right. Another thing you could do is you can create visual boundaries with blue painter's tape. So I used to work at a permanent supportive housing organization on Skid Row, and the homeless population has so about 5% of the population has hoarding disorder, is what people are researchers are finding. That makes it the second most prevalent mental disorder after depression, which is at about 7.5%.
Wait, what?
Yeah, 5%.
Okay, go ahead.
I know, I'm blowing your mind.
You are blowing my mind. Keep going.
But for some reason, with the homeless population, it jumps to about 20%.
I can see that.
Yeah. So I mean, there's no
why.
research on it, but my own instincts about it is that, one, a lot of people who hoard get evicted and become homeless.
Okay, yeah.
So there's that. And then also, if you recall, we were talking about how trauma can start the hoarding behaviors. So trauma, you've lost your home. If you're living out on the streets, trauma, I mean, you can get attacked, you can get beaten up. So many things can happen on the streets that are traumatic. So if you already have that predisposition, it's going to switch it on. Right. Anyway, that's just what I thought.
No, it makes sense, because if you've ever been on Skid Row, you know how people have to really be very careful with their materials and their possessions, right? Okay, but yeah.
So anyway, so sometimes when I was working there to try to help them with their hoarding issues in their buildings, and if we got word that somebody was coming in, like a new resident who, the shelter was saying, yeah, we had to really, throw out their stuff all the time, or they kept bringing in all of these things all the time. And so we were like, okay, this is probably a hoarding issue. We got the red flags. Before they even moved in, we would take blue painter's tape and like where the door swings open and closed, kind of put that blue painter's tape, like a half moon of that swing of the door. So they had a visual boundary to know they can't put anything in that swing of the door. We need to have aisleways of at least 3 feet wide going from each, going into each room. So we put 3 foot wide aisleways everywhere so that they know they can't put anything in those spaces. And then we also don't want them to pile anything higher than 3 feet because, we live in earthquake country and things can fall down on you and you can get really hurt. So we'd put along the walls at 3 feet so they know they can't pile anything higher than 3 feet. And so having those visuals. So that would what we would do when people were moving in. And then alternatively, if someone was already in the middle of hoarding, as we were able to declutter the spaces, we would put the blue painter's tape into spaces we already cleared so that they wouldn't reclutter them.
Was that effective in getting them? Because for me, if I had someone tell me don't go past this blue tape, I'm gonna move the tape. Just being honest. But I can because as you describe it, I'm hearing people that say or think that they want to keep it all. But one reason they're saying that's a very vague statement. If you say you can't keep it all, but you can keep 3 things,
right?
That might be something that people respond to.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's either all or none for them. But if you tell them where their line is, they can actually respect it. So
Mm-hmm.
I guess my question in terms of it being effective, was that effective putting the tape down? That people actually like? I know not 100% would.
Yeah,
but.
it's not 100%,
Yeah.
but it's helpful if they're on board. So before we do all that, we do some preliminary work,
Okay,
right?
okay. Yeah, I got you. Okay,
yeah.
okay.
Because again, like with people, we want to keep their autonomy. In the same way we have the vision plan where they're still making choices about what to keep and what to discard, but the question is different, right? It's not do I want it or whatever. Is this gonna keep me in a space that I want to live in, right? So we want to keep their autonomy as much as possible. So kind of as a last resort, if we don't have an in with them, we're going to go to the health and safety route. So I was part of the LA County Task Force on Hoarding for LA County DMH, Department of Mental Health. And they put together this genius sheet called the LA Fire Safety Code and Evacuation Standards. So it was like a visiting nurse practitioner and like a fire chief got together, and they created a list that goes like 1 to 15 of all of these things that need to be managed in an environment in order to be healthy and safe in terms of fire safety and stuff. So that's the 3 foot, can't pile things higher than 3 feet. And they also give you really good explanations of why these aren't just random rules. So that 3 foot wide aisleway is because a gurney EMTs use is 3 feet wide. So if I'm working with someone who's like, nope, don't want to change, don't want to throw out a darn thing, you're like, well, so I just went to this training. I don't call it a hoarding training. I said, I just went to this health and safety training. And one of the things they were talking about was how, when if someone is in an environment that has a lot of their treasures there, because we're not going to say, junk or trash, and God forbid you were to have a heart attack or, to fall and break your hip or whatever, we need to have those EMTs be able to open the door fully, get that gurney inside, load you up on it, and get you out of there really quickly. Or we need, if God forbid there's a fire, like if you had to like crawl over your stuff and there's smoke and it's dark, and how are you going to get out in time to save yourself? Most people that were resistant up until that point can kind of see like, all right, I can see where you're getting at. Or ultimately, if the landlord or property manager is threatening eviction, well, it's either me out on the street and losing all of my stuff because I can't afford to store it anywhere. So I'm going to lose some stuff either way, but at least I can be healthy and safe if I manage to work within these boundaries.
It's a motivator.
It is.
It's another motivator.
Yeah. It doesn't work for everybody. And
Right.
some people aren't ready. There are some people that literally say, you know what? I get however much on disability or whatever income I get every month. I'm going to just use it towards, my public storage units, and I'm going to put all that stuff there, and I'm willing to live out in a tent on the streets rather than lose my stuff. They're not ready. And there's not much you can do about that, but most people can kind of at least glom onto the health and safety aspect of things.
You have indeed blown my mind. Yes.
So glad.
No, seriously, this is another we don't get. I don't remember talking about this very much in residency, psychiatry residency, and even for you as a psychologist, did you have to do specialized training for hoarding, or were you able to get enough information either after you got your degree and everything? Like what? How did
I get it?
Yeah, how did you become a specialist in this? Yeah.
Yeah, so I graduated for my program in 2011, and I became licensed in 2013. And I at the time, so 2013 was when the DSM-5 came out, and that's the first time that hoarding disorder was officially listed as a disorder. Before that, it was just something that people were starting to become interested in. I did my dissertation on hoarding disorder, and there was so little written about it, because I mean, you're familiar with like dissertations and stuff. You have to get so specific. You have to be like, I'm going to do my dissertation on men between the ages of 25 and 30 who are Latino and have schizophrenia and have 2 cats, because that's like, there's just so much information. You have to get super specific.
I know. Luckily, I haven't had to write one, but
It's a lot.
Yes.
My dissertation was hoarding, symptoms, diagnosis, and treatment.
All right.
Because there was
nothing. Huh?
There's not a lot out
Wow.
there. People didn't even start researching hoarding disorder until the 90s. There just wasn't a lot. So anyway, so 2013 rolls around. I go into private practice because I'm licensed now. And I just start reading everything I can about it and learning more and more and meeting more people, joining the hoarding task force. And I've just, over the years, garnered more and more information about it.
And experience.
That's
why they call it practice.
Yes. And it does not make perfect, but it gets close.
Yes. Where would you like to see awareness about hoarding disorder or treatments go in the future? Any ideas on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that can be done would be just a lot of education. I mean, so I'm of 2 minds about those hoarding shows. Because one, it's great because it gives a lot of education to the general public about how this is a mental illness. This isn't their fault. They're not bad people. But it also the other side of me is like, it's just so,
Exploitive?
that's the word. Yeah.
It's entertainment for people.
It is. If there's something that's a little weird about this being entertainment to watch, That said, I watch all the hoarding shows. So, yeah, but I'd like there to be more education about this being a brain wiring issue. This is not their fault. I want to release the shame around that. And in terms of, I think it would be really great if within all lease agreements, they could incorporate something like that document I was talking about, the fire safety code and evacuation standards, where there's just a general part of the lease agreement is this is the way you need to keep it, so that people have real guidance about it. Because also too, when you have a property manager who's looking at evicting a tenant and just saying, just clean it up. Well, what does that mean?
That's that non-specific stuff.
Yes. Yeah, we need very specific things. What does it mean to be cleaned up? What do you have to see specifically so that tenant can stay in their home? And we all need to talk about that. And we need to talk about when I say clean the bathroom. If I talked to 10 different people and said, go clean your bathroom tonight, we'd have 10 different ideas of what a clean bathroom looks like. We need specifics.
Right.
Make it very concrete.
Okay. Yeah. I feel like that gets into a political, you're going to have to put new laws or enact new laws to get that and put it to place.
Well, what's difficult, so hoarding disorder is for me, the most complex disorder out there, because it involves, first of all, people's privacy that have it. I mean, it's just, they don't really have it anymore because their neighbors are involved, their landlord is involved, maybe the fire department is involved, or animal control, or their relatives. I mean, you can't just, you can have depression and have it just affect you and maybe your close, people, 3 or 4 people close to you, and it can keep it very private. Hoarding disorder, I mean, and of course it affects their neighbors. Like if you live in an apartment building and you are having mold or rodents or insect infestations or structural issues because of the weight of the stuff there, that affects everybody. Actually, the day I went to interview with this permanent supportive housing organization on Skid Row, the people that I was meeting with were an hour late because there was a fire started by someone who was hoarding in one of the places.
Oh boy, yeah.
Yeah.
So it can be. Yeah, I never. I don't unless I think I've seen the shows before. I didn't watch consistently, but I think something like that has been mentioned before. But I don't routinely think of hoarding disorder as one of those conditions where, oh man, this is emergent. This is urgent. This person needs to go to the hospital. It's one of those that they're not doing anything illegal. For the most part, not really harmful unless they go 10 years, 5 years, suffering those symptoms. Yeah, I can see how it kind of like flies under the radar. It's very complex too. Because you can't like stop somebody from keeping their stuff. It's their property.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially if someone has their own dwelling, like if they live in their own home and they own their own home.
Yeah.
How do you get in there and you can't force them to not live like that?
Right.
I don't know. So there's a lot of
intervention is more difficult.
It is. Yeah. It's very difficult. Anyway.
Okay. Well, if people want to find you either for consultation or for work or treatment in your private practice, like what are the ways that they find you?
Best way is my website is drdani.com. It's dr-dani.com.
Okay, good. Did I leave out anything that you wanted to discuss? Did we cover everything? You covered a lot. You did a great job.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I could talk for hours and have about this. Yeah. So, yeah. So and if anyone works at like a community mental health agency or I do a lot of work with legal aid organizations and stuff, I will do trainings for people, helping them to use harm reduction approaches and how to develop rapport and start to manage things so at least it's healthy and safe or safer. So that's something I offer too, besides just being a private clinician.
Okay, well, I appreciate you stopping by and educating the public on this. Actually, would say little publicized or not as publicized condition
for the second most prevalent mental illness
second
out
most
there.
Prevalent.
Yeah.
So you have depression, anxiety, hoarding disorder. Where does anxiety and depression fall? Depression is the highest, you said.
Yeah, I don't know the third or fourth. I just know that depression's at about 7.5%, and hoarding is 5%.
5. Okay, and anxiety is somewhere. Okay,
it's got to be close to 5, I would imagine.
Good grief! Yeah, I didn't know.
And like no one's really talking about it.
Well, they are now. Thank you.
Thanks, Thomas.
All right, we're all finished. Thanks for stopping by.